Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 20 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. This week's interview is with conservative broadcaster Rob Carson. You may know him from years on the radio, or his funny new podcast, or his video cooking channel. He's really an audio renaissance man. We had a great chat about radio, pop culture, and much more. But before my chat with Rob, I wanted to share some thoughts on an evolving genre that I don't think is getting enough attention, faith-based films. You know, once upon a time, Christian movies that weren't made by Mel Gibson were, can I say homespun, quaint perhaps? The budgets were ultra low. The actors were people you didn't recognize. Often they were amateurs. And you know what? Once in a while they hit pay dirt. Fireproof comes to mind. And, of course, more recently, War Room. These are films without major stars. But you know what? They made major bucks and certainly great return on investment. But this is not really the face of filmmaking in the faith-based genre these days. Frankly, it's getting better. The budgets are increasing. The actors are folks you recognize. The quality is up. And it's been quite an evolution in a fairly small part of time. You know, usually this kind of thing maybe takes decades or generations, or it's happening at record speed. And I think you can look at some recent films that kind of really point to that. Heaven is for Real was a big hit. Movies like that are the new norm. Just more recently, The Young Messiah, and also Risen from last year. More films with recognizable names, bigger budgets, more impressive production values, and frankly, better storytelling. The one thing that is changing, or maybe not even changing as much, is the profits from these films. Frankly, some of them are not doing well. They're underperforming. The Young Messiah was a very good film, and certainly I think the faith-based audience should have come out in droves to check it out, even if they were curious at the very least, but it didn't do well at the box office. And the same goes for Risen, which was more successful, but still, I think its box office results or the receipts really weren't commensurate with the talent and the storytelling on board. Which kind of begs the question, why? And I think part of the problem is that for years and years, these Christian-based movies were a little rough around the edges. And I think people have come to expect that, even though the genre is maturing, is evolving, is getting better. So from the studio's point of view, I think often what the case is, they try to reach out to the faith-based crowds. They have networking within churches and different religious communities. And sometimes that's effective. But you know what? There's almost too many films right now in that particular niche. You can't keep going back and back and back and saying, hey, can you kind of network your different relationships and kind of push this film, that film? There's just too many of them, frankly, and they don't really speak to a specific calling. Generally speaking, they've got different needs. They've got different sort of audiences, different demographics they're looking at. So I think it's a healthy evolution, but I think a couple of things have to happen for these particular films to get much better. And one is keep on keeping on. Keep the good actors coming. Have the if not A-list stars, recognizable talents who really bring their A-game to these productions. That's going to make a difference. And also, don't be swayed by the bad box office results or an occasional flop, because flops occur across the board. You've got horror movie flops and action movie flops. We just saw Ghost in the Shell, which is really underperforming, despite the fact that it's got Scarlett Johansson. So kind of stay on target. That's important. But also, try to kind of bully past the critics. Unfortunately, a lot of my fellow critics are pretty rough in these films. They're, it's propaganda, it's this, it's that. Those kind of terms aren't often used when you talk about films like Obvious Child, which was frankly propaganda for pro-abortion rights, you can say it like it is. That's exactly what that movie was. And you could also say it's a good film. I disagree with that, but I had some problems with it. But those kind of movies get a pass from critics, and often the Christian movies don't. So you have to kind of bully past that and kind of expect the reviews are going to be harsh for a while until the genre itself gets more respectability, gets sort of a better standing or a better footwork in this particular region. Then I think you're going to see some change. And I mentioned all of this because there's a new movie that's coming out right now. It's called The Case for Christ. And again, you've got more recognizable stars, including Erica Christensen, and it's a very well-made movie. It's based on a true story about a journalist whose wife found Christ. He was aghast, And as a journalist, he decided to look into not just Christianity, but sort of the New Testament, sort of the, kind of check on the facts behind it. Are there enough resources that kind of correspond to what is said in the New Testament? Things like that. And of course, he became a convert. He's a man of faith now. And that's the story. And the early reviews, I've read some good comments from critics so far. And I kind of think that's welcoming, because I think when a good film comes out, no matter what the theme is, whatever the subject is, I think the critics should respect that and respond to it. So hopefully we'll see a trend in that area where more critics are more open-minded to these films. But the bottom line is, I think that faith-based filmmakers have to start reaching out beyond the base. I think they have to kind of maybe not exactly draw in all secular audiences, but kind of reach out to them and say, hey, you may not agree with this, you may not be a believer, but you know what? This is solid storytelling. I think it's going to draw you in as well. Give us a chance. And until that happens, I think this particular genre is going to struggle a bit, but I think good times are ahead for it, frankly. And now I want to give a HiT Tip of the Week update. I caught a movie a few months back on video on demand. I really liked it. It kind of was in the back of my mind and has been for a while. And now it's available on Netflix, so easy to see for most people who are checking out that particular streaming service. It's called Backcountry, and the storyline couldn't be any more simple. A boy and a girl are out in the woods, and there's something else along with them, and I'll say no more. Missy Peregrine is the star. You remember her from the gymnastic film Stick It from a few years ago. She's done a bunch of TV work since then, but very good here. Good performance all around, frankly. Of course, a very small cast given the setting. But that's one of the things I liked about this movie. Kind of reminded me a little bit of a recent HiT recommendation, Blue Jay. That was another film about people in the woods struggling with the environment and also for other things that are following alongside them. And that was a different kind of film. This is more of a naturalistic approach. But very solid storytelling, good acting across the board. And it's the kind of movie you probably didn't hear of, but makes for a very nice surprise in a streaming service, which just adds it and says, hey, give this a chance, check it out. You may like it. Frankly, I think Backcountry is better than a lot of mainstream movies we've seen in recent months. So it's out there now on Netflix, Backcountry. And if you don't like it, let me know. But if you do, I want to hear that as well. Now let's get to this week's interview. Rob Carson started his radio career at the tender age of 19. He's appeared on more than 150 stations since then, including regular work in Minneapolis, Cincinnati, and Washington, D.C. Or maybe you've heard some of his radio bits on the Rush Limbaugh Show. He was a contributor to that program for years, writing very funny comedy bits, and of course, no one does a comedy and conservatism quite like Rush Limbaugh, and Rob Carson was one of the main reasons why. These days, he's loving life as a podcaster, courtesy of The Rob Carson Show. Rob gets pop culture more than most conservative broadcasters, frankly, and he's got a killer guacamole recipe he wants to share with you. Here's my chat with Rob Carson. Well, first of all, I think you and I have something in common that when I was a kid, I used to love to listen to talk radio, any kind of radio. I'd sit in the car with my dad. We'd kind of have fast food and listen to the radio and just talk and kind of bond in a way. And I think you're a big radio listener from when you were a younger person. Can you talk a little bit about that? And did that kind of plant the seed for you to be a broadcaster today?
Oh, yeah. I grew up in southwest Iowa, and I was a little kid in the 70s. And we used to have these headsets, that you could get that just basically they were AM and FM, but you largely listened to AM, particularly in the mid-70s. And then the FM movement started to kick in. But I would listen to radio out of Chicago. I'd listen to radio out of Omaha. I grew up near Omaha, about 18 miles outside of Omaha, Nebraska. So I listened to the KOIL when it was music, and then it became talk. Now it's an AM, it's talk. Sweet 98, Z92, all of those, WLS out of Chicago, WSB, that's WSB in Atlanta, I'm thinking of WGN out of Chicago, Larry Lujak, a lot of big names, Otis and Diver at Z92 in Omaha, Nebraska, and I just had an appreciation for it. I like to discover, particularly with the large AMs in the middle of the 70s that reached across the country, you could listen to radio out of Dallas. You could listen to radio out of Atlanta. You could listen to a radio with these monster 50,000-watt clear channel signals across the country, particularly at night, and it was kind of glorious. I also listened to Dr. Demento a lot when I was in high school and stuff, and I appreciated the theater of the mind associated with radio. So that's where it really it hit me. Also, I love listening to play-by-play baseball on the radio. The great boys of summer, who, by the way, are dying out too quickly or retiring too quickly, Vince Scully being the latest. But grew up listening to Jack Buck and Harry Carey and those guys, and just the way they painted a picture with their words was better than watching it on television.
Not to sort of say you don't have your own style, but do you find that sometimes when you're doing a show that maybe something about your presentation reminds you of the people you listened to as a kid?
I try not to. I try to take the best conventions of things that I've heard and not copy, but certainly it impacts me. I don't know if I really sound like anybody I did growing up. What I always have said whenever I move into a market, I find someone who I really appreciate, target them, and then try to do better than them. Sometimes I do that, sometimes not. As far as an impact, I think maybe writing. Demento helped me. Also, Otis and Diver in Omaha, Nebraska. They were this kind of this morning show. They did a lot of theater. They did these serials. One was called Space Commander Whack. One of them was called The Mean Farmer. Their style impacted me as far as theater of the mind is concerned. I don't know if I really sound like anyone.
Okay.
Some people say I sound a little like Letterman. Some people say occasionally I sound like Limbaugh. But I'm not trying to emulate anybody.
Gotcha. You know, when you think about conservatives in the pop culture realm, it's often a kind of an uneasy fit. I think some conservatives just say, I don't like pop culture. It's too crass. It doesn't speak to me. It's too liberal. And obviously you take a far more aggressive, interactive approach with that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is it always been part of your style? And also, I think just as someone in this space that it's important that pop culture is sort of more relevant today than it ever was, for better or worse. What's your take on that? And is it, why are more people kind of taking that approach?
Well, first of all, right now we have the ultimate intersection between popular culture and politics going on right now, i.e. Donald Trump. What's going on in the White House? Before that, politics is a huge part of the equation, obviously. It's something you have to, I think, pay attention to. As far as popular culture is concerned, I've always said that I generally don't talk about the Sunday morning talk shows because nobody watches them. And honestly, nobody does. Very few people watch them. Very small numbers of people watch them. Frequently Talk Radio will grab sound bites from them. Kind of like using, late night talk monologue the day after, or SNL bits on Monday morning. Aren't a lot of people watching those shows. There are a whole hell of a lot more people going to movies. There are a whole hell of a lot more people downloading music on iTunes than watching Sunday morning talk shows. We have to be able to connect with people on a variety of different levels, and I don't want to just be a political talker. I don't, because they're a dime a dozen. They're a pundit. But who's a pundit? There are some outstanding pundits. There are some who I like and I appreciate. I've never desired to do that. My first goal is an entertainer. I want to entertain and connect with people and with sponsors on a humorous or profound level. Plus, also, my head would explode if I just did monologue and phone call talk radio every day. And I think part of that also has the fact that I was also incredibly influenced by Johnny Carson. That's why I used the name Carson on the radio. I won't tell you my real name, but it sounds like Morchenschweiger. No, it's not actually Schwarzenegger. But I use the name Carson as a radio name because Johnny Carson grew up near my home in Neolna, Iowa. Thank you. And I greatly admired him and always dreamed of kind of doing late night TV. Then came Letterman, and I had great appreciation for him as well. So when I got into radio, I got into entertainment music radio, morning radio, and I did that for a large part of my career. But I would also bring more to it than just wacky bits, Battle of the Sexes, Daily Dish, and all that crap, because it's just awful. I would bring more to it. And then when I started really doing talk radio, I brought the best conventions of smart, entertaining morning radio, which is hard to find, and the best conventions of great talk radio. And I think it's a marriage that works very well. It's, how often do you really get hooked on, and listen, I was a fill-in host at KHOW, but a lot of times when you hear fill-in host, it's just another talk show host filling in. Mm-hmm. And they're doing the same stuff. So I didn't want to be that.
Gotcha.
And I think I achieved that most of the time.
Yeah. Now, obviously humor is a big part of what you do in your presentation, but it seems like humor has never been more important than it is now. I mean, you've got people, social justice warriors, policing what stand-ups say, making sure that they're taking the proper course. Funny or Die has presidents on the website to kind of make statements. What happened? What changed? I mean, we all love humor, and it's a critical part of your presentation. But why did it become more important than it ever has been? What was? Is there a cultural shift, or was it so slow we didn't even notice it happening?
I think that humor is very important right now because politics are so incredibly polarizing. I used to watch Jon Stewart, some of the shows like his. Then I noticed they were starting to really choose sides, and it wasn't funny anymore. I mean, it could be funny, but a lot of the times it was just kind of irritating. It was just, you could tell they were towing a party line. I think that the use of humor to make a point, whether you are conservative, a liberal, libertarian, whatever, I think it's a great way to disarm the opposition. It's a great way to say something, to make a statement without being strident. I started writing comedy for Rush Limbaugh in 1990, and the first bit I did was a bit called Capitol Hill Bank, because the Capitol Hill Bank scandal was unfolding. And what it was, there was a bank for congressmen that they could use and abuse, and you could have no money in their accounts, and they could write checks for tens of thousands of dollars and not even have to pay it back. So I did a parody of a bank called Capitol Hill Bank for Rush Limbaugh. I was working with a guy named Rusty Humphries. He's a syndicated talk show guy. He was working at PLJ in New York with Scott Shannon and some other people, and I heard he was working with this new guy named Rush Limbaugh. So I just asked him if he would run some of my comedy, and Rusty said, I don't know, and then I just started working. So every time a scandal would come up, every time whatever would come up, I would try to put a spin on it and tie popular culture into the politics while making a statement about it, whether that be a parody about Monica Lewinsky, whether that be a parody about Bill Clinton. I did the Clintstones instead of the Flintstones, which was really good. I might even give you a taste of it if I can find it here. I did the SS Clintanic. I did the Lying King instead of the Lion King about Bill Clinton. So I've done a lot of these, and they're the perfect, I think, marriage of popular culture and politics while saying what you want to say, okay? And I wasn't a Bill Clinton fan, didn't like him, all that, but I could make a point about it. Do you want to hear a little bit of it?
If you got it, sure.
Here's a little bit of it, okay?
Coming this summer, America's favorite family from a state locked in the Stone Age.
The Clintons, they're the modern wonders family. From the town of Little Rock, they are mixing up history.
Whitewater Pictures presents The Clintstones.
Honey, this Razorback-osaurus sure makes paper shredding easy.
Shut up and hand me another stack, Willie. Life has been unbearable since the investigation. Oh, my aching back.
Yes, it's The Clintstones from the town of Little Rock. They've torn a page right out of history and run it through the shredder.
Mr. President, I don't think it's such a good idea to bring those cheerleaders into the Oval Office, you know. Listen, Al, need I remind you who the grand poobah around here is? You don't need to. She reminds us both every day.
Shut up and hand me another stack, Willie.
The Clintstones. Whether they're shedding documents or trading in cattle source futures, they're always a laugh a minute.
Hey, Mr. President, Hillary's leaving town for a healthcare seminar in New Rock City this weekend. Bubba-dubba-doo!
Okay, so there's the Clintstones.
That's good stuff.
Bubba-dubba-doo. Life has been so embarrassing. That's and I did the character voices. Paul Shanklin did the Clinton and Al Gore, and then of course Johnny Donovan did the production at WABC. But that you can laugh at that, even if you don't think that they made money off cattle futures or whatever, so they shredded documents. You can laugh at it.
Well, what's funny, that was biting and topical, but it didn't strike me as cruel. And I think that cruel is kind of the flavor of the day when it comes to the Trump jokes. What is that? Just sort of the partisanship or kind of rising, or is that just the new normal?
I think there is a vitriolic hatred for Donald Trump. I think there is a disbelief that he exists, that he beat Hillary Clinton. That's part of it. The left really can't believe that Donald Trump is the president. And it started. I remember a year ago, Ann Coulter, I believe, was on with Bill Maher. And he said, and this was when the primary process was just starting, and she said, who's going to be the next president? Or he said, who's going to be the next president? She said, Donald Trump. And the audience laugh. You got. I mean, I don't have that. But they laugh, and there was a lot of that. There's a lot of when it comes to the left of the left in this country. They're not a very humorous people. They're not a very joyful people. If you watch a number of the shows, they say things that are, or even if you watch like Twitter and you like Lena Dunham and these other people, they say vicious and cruel things that aren't funny. And I always say, cross your legs. Your partisanship is showing. You can say something. There are some people who don't want to entertain with their jokes. They want to damage.
Yeah.
And it's just not very funny. That's why Air America didn't work. Air America was a joyless, very angry and bitter, awful network. It collapsed on itself, even when they were begging for money. And on the other side of the political equation, it just doesn't seem that conservatives have a sense of humor at all. Liberals have a very mean sense of humor. Conservatives don't even bother with it. I think that's too bad because there are very few shows that I hear on talk radio that are funny. Glenn Beck used to be really funny. Glenn Beck is now just kind of bipolar. Rush has always been funny. I know a guy named Chris Plant, he's funny, but by and large, conservative talk radio, not funny.
Yeah.
It takes itself way too seriously.
Talk a little about your professional ties with Rush Limbaugh. What did you kind of learn by kind of writing content for him that maybe listeners aren't aware of? Or what did you kind of take away from that partnership?
It's been a glorious partnership. I've spoken to Rush a few times. I met him once. By and large, most of the time that I spent working with him, I worked through Johnny Donovan, the voice of the Rush Limbaugh program. He was production director of ABC, WABC. He is now retired, but he's still doing some voice work. And Kit Carson was Rush's producer. He was the gatekeeper for my comedy. And he was a glorious, awesome person. He gave me such terrific feedback. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. Since then, I haven't really been doing anything for Rush, just because Johnny's not there, Kit's not there. But over the years, it was just a joy to be able to, say, for instance, have Johnny Donovan or Kit Carson call me and say, "Hey, we need a bit about what? Maybe you could do something on this." And that's when I click. That's when I go, "Okay, done. I'll get it done." And then I do the voice work. So I learned a lot from listening to Rush's show. I think there are very few people who are as well prepared when they hit the microphone and as knowledgeable of politics and the political process as Rush Limbaugh. So I learned a lot from him as far as ideologically, as far as, I don't know. I learned a lot from listening to his show.
Gotcha.
And then I learned a lot working with Johnny Donovan. And also just had a lot of fun. It used to be so funny when I first started in 1990 working for Rush. I would literally type out on a word processor a script, print it off, record my voice parts on reel-to-reel, and send them overnight to New York. The last decade or more, now I just send the text file, record the MP3s, and fire it off to Johnny Donovan. It's done. Literally a half an hour later.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is just amazing, and so that I learned a lot about production and things like that. Just if you write long enough, your writing gets better because you learn, and you get feedback. So there's a whole bunch of things that I learned working with Rush.
Gotcha. In addition to the comedy writing you do and the broadcasting and your podcast, you do cooking videos.
Yes.
And I was thinking about some of the changes I've had to make in my career over the years and kind of diversifying what I do. I'm on social media. You're sort of tenfold that. Is it sort of a pragmatic approach to kind of be everywhere, to be on different formats, to be on social media, to have cooking videos, or it's just, hey, I love it all, I want to do it all, and if it helps my career, then so be it?
Well, you have to. You have to perform on multiple media. You have to cut through the clutter. And if that means you have to have a presence on all of them, then you have a presence on all of them. I have been doing video along with radio for a long time. I do, when I was in D.C., I did a lot of man-on-the-street stuff. I did things where I'd be, flown out to L.A. for the Oscars or flown out to L.A. for a press junket with TBS or TNT, and I'd make it into a Man on the Street video. I had a great video producer, and I have a good on-camera presence. As far as cooking, I started cooking when I was 15 years old. I was hired illegally as a truck stop as a fry cook. I just did it for my own enjoyment, and I'm self-taught. And when I was in D.C., I was actually invited out to this company that shot videos wanted somebody who could talk about new cars with car manufacturers and, make it look cool. Like, hey, check out this new model from whoever and whatever. And they asked me to come over and do an audition and make something. Okay, so stand there and make something while on camera. So I have a guacamole that I call Guac of Ages, greatest in the history of mankind. Just Google it, Rob Carson, Guac of Ages, trademark. Thank you very much. And I made Guac of Ages for them and then fed it to their staff, and they said, a few days later, the car thing fell through, and they said, would you like to do some cooking videos? I said, hell yeah. So they came to my house, and I would come up with my own recipes, or I'd go, work with a chef, and they would bring out 2 cameras, dolly, booms, the whole deal to my kitchen. And then I did some YouTube with a guy who was just good at video. And it was just a way to express myself, use humor, and also cook. And then lately I've been doing a few, and I'm going to do more of these, Facebook Lives from my kitchen where I actually, while I'm cooking, discuss the day's events. Why not? And I like to say that we can disagree on politics, but we won't disagree on ribs unless you're a vegan, and if that's the case, you have an eating disorder. So that's one of the reasons why I do it. Food brings us together. All of my friends in D.C., I lived there for about 10 years, all of my friends in D.C. are liberal. But man, we ate some epic meals, and we got together every night over wine, every night over a meal, every New Year's, and it brought us together. So it became a way for me to reach more people. On the other side of things, I just started when I was let go from KCMO in Kansas City, and it was a blessing to be let go because I've learned a hell of a lot. Started a Rob Carson show on Facebook, which is my daily blog, is my show blog. I do live Facebook video. I do post all of my daily podcasts there, whether video or audio. I did a Facebook page called Rob Carson's Table. That is my food blog. I'm still working on building that. I built a website, robcarsonshow.com. Obviously, Twitter is still going with Rob Carson. I launched and getting ready to launch a T-shirt and gear line with politically incorrect sayings on them, and I'll send you some of the drawings I'm working with a graphic designer who's just brilliant. His name's Sam Cangelosi, and he has brought life to the sayings that I'm putting on gear, like sometimes war is the answer. You can't coexist, spelled in religious science. You can't coexist with someone to kill you. Veganism is an eating disorder. I've got a bunch of them. They're very funny, and his graphics bring them to life. We're going to launch that. That's the next thing. I'm doing a daily podcast, and I also, since I got out, I got a thing called a Comrex Brick, and a Comrex Brick allows me to continue what I was doing before KCMO, which is to broadcast around the country on any station in a heartbeat. All right? So I'll give you an example. Hold on, I'll give you an example. I think this will work. Let me go here to, this is how quickly, for instance, I can hook up with KMOX in St. Louis. Let me see if I can do this real quick.
Okay.
Hold on. Comrex Brick. And I'm going to go over to KMOX in St. Louis. Hold on one second. It's just an amazing unit. It is, you used to have to do a thing called an ISDN line, which meant you had to install the phone line. They don't install those residentially anymore. Here I am. Let me see if I can do this. KMOX not connected. Hold on. They're not connected right now. Let's try KHOW. Connect.
Are you essentially piggybacking on their airwaves?
With any station that I have their IP address for. So tomorrow, like Friday and Monday and Tuesday, I'm on WWTN in Nashville. Last week I was on KHOW in Denver and KMOX in St. Louis. So you got to be able to perform on multiple platforms: video, audio, social networking. The whole deal.
Yeah.
You cannot just be a radio guy who goes in and does the show and then leaves.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you're a veteran broadcaster, and you don't need to learn anything new. But I'm kind of curious, becoming a podcaster and doing it in that format, is it much different? Do you find your style different? Do you find your interaction different? Has anything changed with your approach, or is it just sort of transitioning to a new medium?
Well, it used to be. There is it's very hard hard to do a show, or at least it used to be hard to do a show where you just go in and you can a show, which is what podcasting is. You can a show. You go into a studio, you're not talking with anyone. You are talking to people. And a lot of the times it takes away the magic of being on the radio. And maybe that's just psychological. But I've done auditions at radio stations where they will tell me, okay, go into the studio and with whoever and do a show. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. When you get into the flow of a podcast, you keep in mind you are talking to an audience, but you can make it sound magical. You can make it sound like you were actually talking to people, even though you can't see them. There's something you can do. It helps if you do it Facebook Live. I do Facebook Live video with cameras, and I can watch comments immediately streaming in. So then I can see people who are listening, where they're listening, what questions they have, and that helps. But you have to adjust to speaking without interacting and making it sound like you're talking with people rather than at them.
Gotcha. Interesting. Before I let you go, I had one last question. As a comic writer, looking at Donald Trump as president, there are all the obvious jokes, the orange skin, the hair, blah, blah, blah. Do you find it actually more challenging to make jokes with him in the White House, or is it just a matter of hitting different topics because everyone else is hitting him?
I haven't done a lot of Trump writing with Donald Trump as the character because everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
I would rather take something that's going on in the Trump administration. I saw a funny bit today. Somebody sent me a meme on the Gmail, and it was they dummied up a box of Uncle Ben's rice, and it said Uncle Ben's Condoleezza fried rice, and or Uncle Benghazi. It was Uncle Benghazi, and that was pretty funny. Now that might be something I could convert into a parody, a parody of that product. So I don't do a lot of. I've been asked to do, write Donald Trump calling into a radio show, and I haven't really done much of it of that yet. And maybe I will. Maybe I will.
Gotcha.
Everybody's trying to do a Trump impersonation, and they want me to write where this is Donald Trump calling in, and I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Before I let you go, we always ask our guests at Hollywood and Toto what they're watching now, maybe the books on their shelf that they want to recommend, even a new album they've been checking out or downloading. Anything kind of come to mind for you, something you've seen recently? It doesn't have to be something brand new. It could be a show from 20 years ago that you've just kind of rediscovered, but anything you can share with our listeners?
Well, HGTV is the go-to. HGTV is the go-to. It is the most, it got me away from political politics kind of an oxymoron, but it got me away from the news cycle, and at night I just sit down with my wife and we watch Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna. It is delightful. They are happily married. It's glorious. It's a wonderful show. Tiny House Hunters. I did a parody of that, by the way. I did Tiny House Hunters 1 year later when the happy couples want to kill each other. So I did that. I've been watching a lot of HGTV. I'm kind of getting into Americans. Americans is an interesting show that I've been watching with my son on Netflix. Pretty good. A lot of everybody screws everybody, but I think it's pretty well written, and what I've seen it is very nice. As far as reading, I just got a new book, and this is it's an insider book. It's called Viral Podcasting, and it's by a guy named Kerry Lutz, and it's just kind of obviously it's narrow casting because I'm trying to make money as podcaster, and so I'm kind of reading that right now. Most of the time I don't read for pleasure because I have to freaking read all day. If you've ever seen on my Facebook page where I do a video of just the show prep, I read. If I do a 4-hour show, I'm reading 6 or 7 hours. If I do just a half an hour podcast, I'm reading 3 or 4 hours. So I don't really enjoy reading when I'm not, reading, doing show prep. It'd be kind of like eating Taco Bell if I work at Taco Bell after I eat Taco Bell. It's like, no, I don't want churro or whatever. I'm not interested.
Gotcha. Well, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and we will look forward to all the different projects you've got working on. I will have links aplenty at the show notes page so people can find out more about you, about your podcast, about your work, and give me an update when you have those T-shirts ready. I want to link to that as well because that sounds like a lot of fun, and it might anger my wife because my wife is decidedly left of center, and she wears her "She Persisted" shirt from time to time, and I need to fight fire with fire. So
we We've got some very politically charged. But they're funny. We've also got some non-political stuff. It's going to be either on Teespring or TeePublic, and I will send you the link as soon as we get the page launched because I think you're really going to love them.
Alrighty. Again, Rob Carson, thank you so much. Check him out all over on YouTube, on Facebook, on podcasting. He's everywhere, and it's delightful to speak to you. And we'll check in soon.
All right, Christian. Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.